I want to allow for Ray and Carli to introduce themselves and to talk about why they got into the business, the recovery business, and then to just get right into what I know is going to be an amazing presentation. So with that, Ray?
Sure. Thank you for that introduction. And let me tell you that I know when you get those forms back, certainly you're going to hear the value of this forum, Mario, because it's been an incredible resource for us and a lot of people. So thanks for doing all the work that you're doing. And I'll share again, you know, we've changed our name, we're expanding. The reason we changed our name is because we're growing and adding diversity of programming. For those of you that have seen us before, you might recognize the picture that is hanging behind Carli and I, and this little turret that looks like it's growing out of the top of Carli's head is actually the top of our John Street facility set in a beautiful historic home. And in fact, we live in that historic district. And if you looked out my front window, it would look something like this. So we're really proud of our facilities. But we're also very passionate about making treatment and help much more accessible. So I encourage you to, you know, look at our website. If you have questions, don't hesitate to call our admissions team, because not only do we provide treatment, but we are a resource for if you don't know what you need. So again, my name is Ray Green, and my husband and I started what was then Sanford House in 2015, a 10-bed women's facility. And we found that in addition to treating the clients, we have a great mission and passion for helping change the behavioral health system, particularly in the state of Michigan. I have a background as a professional counselor. And I can speak for Carli before she does her introduction, in that both of us and our families have been profoundly impacted by this disease. And that motivates and propels us, as well as the client stories that we have every day that we're grateful for. So Carli, if you'd like to make your introduction before we start our presentation.
Sure. So my name is Carli Noffsinger, and I have an MSW and a CAADC, and I work here at Sanford House, and my primary function is to facilitate and manage our family programs. And we have a pretty advanced array of services for families. We start all of our families off with a 4-session education series. When families complete that, which takes about 4 weeks, then we can move our families into phase 1 support. And in phase 1 support, families experience once a week meetings where they have a chance to talk about what they think, what they feel, what they want, where they're changing their behaviors and altering behavioral patterns with their loved one that's in recovery. So they talk about what goes well, and they talk about where they need some help. Like if they're having difficulty setting boundaries or having difficulties handling feelings of mistrust, and they get a chance to share that with other people with the same kinds of circumstances. So that phase 1 of our family support group goes on for 6 months. And then we have a second 6 months called phase 2, where people that have completed phase 1 choose to go on to phase 2, and they meet every other week for an hour. And I do some kind of a lecture information type situation that they have requested. And then we fill out personal questionnaires about that kind of how we responded to the topic. And then we get a discussion going. And at this point, I am drumming up in my head another level of family support that we hope to be able to start to do quarterly, but in time, we'll know where we're going to go with that.
Before
And right
you
now,
guys-
go ahead.
I'm sorry, no, you go ahead, Carly.
Oh, okay.
I'll interject when you're done.
Oh, okay. Right now, all of our services through our family program are done virtually, and just so everybody knows that we keep safe distance for everybody.
Other than us right now.
Right,
Right.
really. Look at this.
So
Here
I
we
want
are.
to, before you guys roll into your PowerPoint, and your program, your presentation, I did want to add this. Kind of serendipitously, we have a scholarship program. We award $250 scholarships to people in need in our community. And there was a person who reached out to us who asked for help. He is at this facility, Sanford Behavioral Health. And, it was kind of out of the Washtenaw fan box, but I wanted everyone on here to know that the Sanford folks wanted to work with us to make certain that this young person is going to receive the care he needs, so that he has a better chance of success upon discharge from this facility. So what I'm saying, and we have partners like that in our community, Dawn Farm, Home and New Vision. But what I look for is, not everyone can afford the best facility in the country or in the in the state of Michigan. I look for people that say, we've been there too, so we want to help others. And I'm happy to report that I lived that on Friday of last week with the people that run this facility. They're solid people. With that, I want to turn it over to you guys to start educating us on why we need to better understand relapse, which is commonplace in the world of recovery.
Sure. One just end note, Mario, to what you're saying is that we work with every private insurance provider in the state. Oftentimes the stays are shorter than we would clinically prefer. And so that we have a situation where sometimes we can keep people on for a little longer, even after exhausting their insurance coverage through the generosity of organizations like yours. So thank you for that. So what we're going to talk about tonight, I'm going to start off by just talking a little bit about why language matters. And when we are talking about substance use disorder, there's a lot of stigma. And I'm going to read a quote. And Brendan, if you want to put up the first slide, we did a PowerPoint that we're not going to leave up because we want you to feel like we're in the room with you, but just so that you can have a little change up, not get too bored with us. So the next one would be our reframe slide. And I'm going to read a quote by Dr. Nora Volkov, who's the director of NIDA, the National Institute on Drug Abuse. And what she said was that substance use disorders are the most stigmatized medical problem over HIV, depression, and other psychiatric disorders. And she said it's essential to avoid words like abuse or abuser, because those words imply that the patient is guilty of some sort of misconduct or selfish indulgence. Now, I will point out that the organization that she works for is called the National Institute on Drug Abuse. So I think that it sums up in and of itself the way we have to go with language. But let's talk about the word relapse. Relapse, if you look up that word, you're going to find things like regress, weaken, deteriorate, degenerate. And so tonight, as we talk about relapse, I think it's real important that we make an intentional decision to use a different term, that this is actually a recurrence, and that would be a recurrence of a primary chronic disease. And it's not a selfish indulgence. It is the trajectory of this disease, because it is defined by the inability to consistently abstain. And I'm going to refer quickly for those of you in the audience, and I can't see you, so I don't know, but I know Mario will know that Chevy Chase, who started out on Saturday Night Live back, I think, before we were in college. And he was one of the first personalities to go into recovery and talk about his journey. But when he had a recurrence, when he relapsed, there was an article written that he needed to go in and get a tune-up. And so this author said the minimization of Chase's life-threatening illness by describing his treatment as a tune-up only serves to perpetuate the foolish myth that addiction isn't a disease, and that they made a conscious decision to have this recurrence. So, again, we can start with language, and there's lots of articles coming out now about how we can reframe this disease. And a couple quick things that I'll mention are that, remember to use that first person language, that there's more to a person than their diagnosis. So a person with substance use disorder rather than a substance abuser. Also highlighting, as we're doing tonight, and as Mario did when he introduced us, is that solutions and quality treatment are messages that help mitigate that stigma, that, we're improving the experiences within the healthcare system. And then finally, stories, narratives that humanize people. That's another way to help others understand what's going on during this time. And that for counselors such as Carli and I, a recurrence is actually, it's kind of like data analysis that serves to tell us what isn't working in this person's recovery plan, and how do we fix it? How do we tweak it? How do we adjust it? So with that introduction on language, I'm going to hand it over to Carli for the next slide. And I meant to have that taken off, but there we go. All right, this is Carli's slide, and we'll let you look at this pretty slide for a minute, and then we'll take it off, Brandon, in, I don't know, 30 seconds or so that we could see Carli as she talks about the meat of this here.
So what you're looking at is a person that's focused and concentrating on the emotional state of using, and it's producing multiple triggering thoughts in her head. So I think they got that, Brandon. Thanks.
Thank you.
So when it comes to understanding relapse better, one of the most important things I think for us as family members, and I am one of those people, I was raised in a family where there was addictive disease. And my perception of what addictive disease was and what I now know it is remarkably different. And so I invite you to listen to what we have to say to you, and I hope that you will take it to heart. The first thing that I'd like you to understand as we look at formerly relapse, now recurrence, that's what I'm going to be calling it, okay? What I want you to understand is that the condition that we human beings get in when we use mood-altering substance, that condition is called a state behavior. And state behaviors have really deep emotional meaning to us, and they like grab us. And we do not forget that sensation and that feeling. And so when that state, which for most folks that do develop addictive disease, these people have a really positive emotional state reaction to the substance that they're using. And they are taken by it. And they are so taken by it that when they are stressed, when they are anxious, when they have a combination of emotional and, environmental factors come together, they automatically think to go back to that substance. And that's part of the brain process involved in addictive disease. So it's huge, and they're grabbed by it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the brain things. Ray's going to do that in a few minutes. But before she does, I want you to understand that a state behavior is any positive sensation or even a negative sensation that is easily recalled when you're under stress, and it will remind you that the quickest relief is going to be offered by that substance. We don't forget state behaviors, whether they're positive or whether they're negative. And that's how come if you are someone that experienced extreme relief, you're someone that's really anxious and you experience extreme relief from using substances, you are way more likely to do it again. So we don't forget that behaviors, and they're really deep in our memory. And a way for you to maybe get an understanding of this would be think about a situation where you were surprised, either positively or negatively, by a situation that occurred in your life, and the depth of that sensation stays with you, okay? And that is the same kind of situation and response when someone that has addictive disease connects to their substance. Only what they get, folks, it's like times 10. It is so deep and so overpowering. And understanding that addiction is a brain disease means that functions of a brain, a human brain, will change as someone progresses through the disease. And there are many times where there are sensations where people simply don't have the physical ability in the moment to stop and think, because they don't have the good brain connections to do that. So please understand that substance use is a state behavior, okay? And before I turn it over to Ray, we have a slide that is going to come up a little bit later, and it's from Dr. Volkoff, but I'd like to be able to read it to you now. And she's giving an interview, and she's talking about recurrence. And here's what she says. Repeated experience is required before addiction can develop, both psychologically and within the brain. The process is similar to falling in love. While there can be what might be called love at first sight with either a person or a drug, ongoing contact is necessary to create the associations and shift in priorities that drive craving and behavior change. You have to have repeated exposure. When you experience these extraordinary sensations, it creates a very deep memory almost immediately. And that in turn will generate the desire the next time you're in those circumstances. So one thing I'd like you to take from this is it's really a brain situation, and sometimes people don't have the control that they wish that they had.
I want to add, I fact checked you guys. I Googled the definition of relapse.
Yeah.
And, it said a declining condition, but another thing it said was backsliding. That's
Yes.
not exactly a positive term.
No, it's not.
It's like one step forward, two steps back. That's not what's happening when somebody relapses. So I'm glad you guys brought that up, because I never viewed the term relapse in that way. So anyway, maybe we'll start something that'll go viral here. Anyway, look, onward. keep going.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to read the chat that came up. They're asking for our website and our names. So we'll, Marilyn, maybe you can put those up on the chat out there. So next slide, and this one is how the brain never forgets. So we are now at a time and made advances in science where we can see the living brain through MRIs, through PET scans. Now I will add that this brain was designed by the creative talents of my daughter. So this was not a PET scan, but she put all the main parts in here for you guys so you can understand it. And understanding this disease is a key to treating it with the same compassion as with other diseases. And bottom line, when someone struggles with progressed disease state, their brain has been hijacked. And this disorder actually remolds the neuroactivity in the brain so that substances then have supreme value. It's like a camera lens zooming in onto one object and that object only, and pushing everything else out of the way. And that's how it operates. And so the compulsion to use is in fact as strong as the will to survive. And I'm going to use this slide to tell you why. The nucleus accumbens, that little set of glands that you see labeled there, is what is the reward reinforcement center of the brain. And that's kind of like Pavlov's dogs when they would start drooling if they heard the bell ring or that. And so when I've talked to my clients about this, I tell them that that's kind of like the frat house of the brain. And it's a frat house run amok, where the reward system is focused 100% on the next use of that psychoactive substance, rather than the bigger picture of life and all of the things that you do, go to work, have a family, all of that. That psychoactive substance takes supreme importance. And while that's happening, that prefrontal cortex, that rational, logical thought process of ours, basically goes to sleep. So what you've got then is you've got an executive director asleep at the wheel, and you've got the nucleus accumbens and the sort of evolutionary survival system running the show. So, basically the caveman and survival instincts are running the show. The amygdala, that's the treasure trove of memories. All of these state behavior memories, the using memories, the euphoric memories, the feeling of love, the feeling of calmness, the feeling of relaxing, the triggers that go along with it, which might be the local party store down the street. All of that stuff is stored in that amygdala. And so it's there forever. The brain never forgets. It holds these memories forever. And the midbrain we threw in there because that's kind of like the dopamine sprinkler. That's activated when the nucleus accumbens gets a positive reward reinforcement. It tells the midbrain to sprinkle dopamine around. And when someone uses a psychoactive substance, it's like an accelerator or a pressor foot on that dopamine sprinkler. So that's what's going on in the disease of addiction. Now, just as with the progression of the disease, the healing of the disease also takes time. And so that sleepy executive director prefrontal cortex takes a little bit of time to wake up. The day someone walks into treatment and they stop using their psychoactive substance doesn't mean their brain is healed. This is a long healing process, hence the concept of recurrences. So thank you. I left that one up because I think it's such a pretty little brain to understand.
Ray and Carli and everybody listening, therein lies the hope for people in recovery, that the brain, through the process of neuroplasticity, can heal itself. But you got to stop the drugs, right? You've got to stop self-medicating to allow that brain to heal. And, I used to work with people who would suffer a stroke. And just to reiterate the importance of what Ray and Carli are saying, people would come to us to learn to speak again who couldn't speak as a result of a stroke. We don't wave a wand and get them talking in 1 month. I mean, 1 year later, they're starting to talk again. And so just, through personal experience, I can tell you guys, that is what people in recovery have to look forward to. Your brain can heal.
Yeah, there is infinite hope and beauty in the recovery process. And what you just said too, when someone has a stroke, that's very readily understandable for most of the general public. Whereas the disease of substance use disorder, a lot of times you can't see it. So you don't know that there's a healing process going on. But anyway, that's a whole nother session. I want to hand it back over to Carli here with our next piece on how does a person prepare for something they want to avoid?
Okay. So how does somebody prepare for something that they want to avoid?
Oh, Brandon, you can show our cute little slide here. There you go. The bag over the head.
Okay. So we're going to answer the questions that are on the bag. So,
oh, you can take it down, Brendan. That's just a little waker upper.
Okay. So as family members of people with addictive disease, we have to understand that as we went through this journey with people's disease progressing, what happened was we began to change. We did not see all that was going on with our own behavior changes towards the person that's in recovery. So one of the things that we teach in our family education program is that every adult family member needs a recovery plan, not just the person that has addictive disease. And the reason that everybody needs a recovery plan that's going to move them forward through an ever-changing process is because addictive disease is a lifelong thing. And how someone looks when they come out of treatment is really different than how someone looks even 3 to 4 months after that period of time. So every person in the family needs to have, I would say an adult, anybody over age 15, needs to have their own recovery plan. And I want to quick read through some of the elements of a recovery plan. And keep in mind that as recovery progresses, there are people who are going to have recurrence. We know that with any chronic disease, there is recurrence, and it's not necessarily a sign of weakness. In fact, I don't believe that it is. When someone has a recurrence, it's simply a sign that something isn't working in their environment. And one of the biggest influences in a person's recovery environment is their family. And so if every family member that is an adult creates a treatment plan for themselves to alter their behaviors to support their recovering loved one, we have a chance of developing a really positive recovery setting and environment for that individual. So quickly, I want to run down. I have some steps that would be important to be in a family recovery plan. And that would be attend individual counseling to reduce your own codependent behaviors and learn about boundaries and begin setting and practicing boundaries. Attend a weekly support group for yourself with other people dealing with codependent behavior, people that have the common shared interest, and listen to some of the boundaries that they set and how they talk about it. We would recommend that a person obtain a sponsor or accountability partner, especially if you choose not to get one-to-one counseling. It's helpful to journal thoughts and feelings with your interactions with your loved one, both the positive and the negative, and just journal it like 2-3 times a week. And then take those journaled situations to your counselor or your identified support person. and discuss these and process these together. And you're going to be able to identify maybe where you ran into trouble and how to do it different next time. We encourage reading about addictive disease and family life. And at this point, I want to remind people that Sanford House puts out this excellent online magazine called Excursions. And we have articles specifically for family members, and we have articles specifically for folks in recovery. And these articles are new there are new articles weekly, and I do a lot of articles for family members. I do it about every 2 weeks, and they're something that I would like you to take a look at. If you do look at Excursions, is please take a look at a recent article on trust. And also there are a couple of other articles in there about relapse to take a look at, but understand that it is very possible that you will be dealing with a recurrent event or an event of recurrence. So, it's important that you keep yourself updated on what's going on out there. The other thing that we recommend is practice daily positive self-care, like eating right, sleeping right, exercising, working, and playing. A family cannot put all its time into talking about addiction and healing from addiction. Also, the big thing is keeping communication open with your loved one that has substance use disorder. And we recommend that you set a time aside at least once a week to sit down and share how you're doing with your recovery plans with each other, and to share your thoughts and share your feelings. It's important to know that one thing I really recommend that you stop doing is stop arguing, that you make an agreement with yourself that you will not argue, and that you just agree to disagree on some facts and you make no decisions about it, but you don't argue, you share feelings, and you communicate your thoughts. It's important in your recovery plan that you come up with ways to be clear in your communication and not judge or shame your family member that has a substance use disorder. It's important also in your recovery plan that you make time to support the things that you need to do to take care of yourself, as well as allowing time for the person with addictive disease to take care of themselves and do what they have to do for their recovery plan. All the time, keep in mind that recurrence is possible. And if you follow your recovery plan and pay attention to what's going on with the person that has the disease and you're communicating with each other, you're going to know when problems start to arise, okay? And I want to move from what ought to be in a family and individual recovery plan from the family member's perspective. I want to take it to taking a look at warning signs of recurrence.
Carli, before we do that, and this is where there's a really good question here. Can we answer this one question? In terms of, is there a time frame for brain healing?
Is there a time frame?
You guys go ahead and answer it. I'll tell you what I know, but go ahead as you guys are experts in the field. What's been your
We're experts? All right, the experts shall speak. So here's what we see is that when someone comes in, if they're in detox, in need of subacute detox and medical care, you're going to see a pretty significant change in 3 to 5 days. But that is simply a baby step. About 6 weeks into the process, you'll see some more brain healing, but the real turning point is about 90 days or 3 months, which, interesting to me, coincides with 1936 with Dr. Bob and Bill W., when they knew that 90 meetings in 90 days was effective. Well, now we know that in 90 days, there is a lot of healing that goes on in the brain, and that decision-making process and rational thinking begins to return. But it really is between 9 months and a year. And there are lots of statistics out there as well that maybe say, 5 years or that, but after a year, the rate of relapse goes down by about half. So if you can get through that first year, you're gonna see a real progression in the healing process.
Yeah, and that is consistent, Ray, with what I was going to say, which is our guest speaker in March, Dr. Anna Lemke. We talked about her. This is her book right here. Okay, Dopamine Nation. She says that one of the things she shares with her patients is whatever the addictive drug is, she says, I want you to try an experiment. Try stopping for 4 weeks. And then let's talk about what you're experiencing after the 4 weeks that's better, worse. I want to get your opinion, but you've got to be able to abstain for 4 weeks. And the reason she picks 4 weeks is the reason you gave. You see a lot of healing that takes place in those 30 days, those initial 30 days. But the other thing I wanted to say that's consistent with what you said is that typically, if you can get through that first year, that relapse rate drops significantly. So it's the same thing I heard, you guys. So,
hey, maybe you're an expert too, Mario.
I'm not an expert, but I'll tell you what
I think you sound like one. Come on.
When my son, when I learned of his addiction, I did not put my head in the sand. I wanted to become, as much as a business guy can become an expert on addiction, I wanted to become an expert to give my kid a fighting chance so that he could rely on me to come to me for advice. I didn't want to be ignorant. When he came to me asking for help or for a question. And I will tell you that there are a lot of family members out there who just say to heck with it. I don't want to learn about it. Well, let me tell you, if it was cancer, you'd be researching who the best doctor was. If it was diabetes, you'd be on the phone with that endocrinologist, the docs that take care of the endos that take care of diabetes. If it was a broken leg, you'd be on the phone with your physical medicine and rehabilitation physician. You wouldn't be.
Mario, you're right on, you hit the nail on the head here, but this disease, the nature of the disease and its manifestation in behaviors tires people out. So sometimes they're just exhausted because they're being as impacted as the person who's actually using the psychoactive substance. So you're right. A lot of times, people will just be, they're just tired, and that's what it does. That's what it's designed to do, because that's how it survives. Yeah. But we wanted to talk about warning signs so that we can, watch for those warning signs during that early recovery process, in particular.
So, as we talked about what the adult family members need to do to have an effective recovery plan. The whole idea behind this, folks, is what we're trying to do is to build a support network for you and a good communication network, so that eventually what you're going to be able to do with the person that you love that has this disease is you're really going to form a really good connection. And it's going to be a connection of safety for the two of you. With the idea of building these things, you're going to have to, again, I just can't say this enough, you're really going to have to start having some good communication with each other. And when that happens, it's not going to be such a surprise to you when someone may be demonstrating some signs, because you will be talking to them, you will be recognizing and noticing their thoughts. But here's some of the things that can be indicators that someone is headed toward a recurrence. That is, the usual pattern of communication is disrupted or consistently put off. So one thing that I just can't stress enough is please set a time every week where there can be either partnership or family discussion of everyone sharing their relapse prevention plans, okay? And when someone in the family does not want to participate, it very likely means that something isn't going well in their treatment plan and they don't want to be a part of what's going on. Another thing is when folks that are in recovery start to have contact with their support people at a reduced rate, such as, well, I'm not going to meet with them this week because I'm really too busy. I got too much to do. Or when people start questioning, when they come into a few weeks of recovery and they're feeling pretty good, and they start verbalizing things like, I wonder if I'm really addicted because, gosh, I don't even miss it. I mean, I'm doing pretty good in life. Maybe I don't have a problem. When you hear that kind of thing, that's a trouble sign. When people are continuously putting themselves in a situation of halt, the situation of being too hungry, too angry, too lonely, or too tired, that's a sign that folks are wearing themselves down and they could be headed for trouble. The other thing is having low feelings or no feelings of gratitude for what they have in their life. Sensations and feelings of complacency, not, taking what they got to do serious, okay? And that goes both sides, the family and the person with the disease. And feelings of envy or having unreasonable expectations or resentment or self-pity building up, that's a sign that somebody could be headed for trouble, okay? Now, here's arrived at trouble, okay? That would be absolutely, we know they are in big trouble if they're doubting that they now have addictive disease. And they're verbalizing statements of negativity or demanding that other people's feelings don't count. Overworking, underworking, or just too much free time. Avoiding support people, avoiding fun and excuse making. Stopping the very activity that maintains their sobriety. Isolating, having lots of depressed thoughts, and depressive feelings beginning to escalate, okay? People that are in early recovery are the folks that are the most likely to have recurrent events because of the brain still going through that change process. So things that I would want family members to remember is never believe that your family member won't have a relapse. And never stop working your program of recovery, because it's your program of recovery that's going to get you to a point of strength, and your loved ones' individual recovery plan that's going to get them to a point of strength where you can come together and have that connection. Your enemy is complacency. And for family members, I really want you to remember this. You can influence your loved one, but you can only control yourself. And always, always, always keep lines of communication open. Okay. So that's what I have about.
I'm just going to sneak this in. This is my
Yep.
favorite book of all time, 1986, Terrence Gorski. But what he says is recovery is like going up, walking up a down escalator. It's impossible to stand still. And that's what Carli just described in detail. So next we're going to put up just a couple of quotes, and then we're going to wrap up with the final thought. So Brandon, if you can put up the quote slide. We'll read that, and then we just have one final thought to finish up with. So the first one, Carli's already read. I'm going to read the short one in the middle and then give the next one to Carli. Addiction is defined as a chronic relapsing brain disorder that results in compulsive drug use that continues despite negative consequences. And that's National Institute for Drug Abuse.
Okay. So this is from Dr. Ayanna Jordan, MD, the Yale School of Medicine. Brain changes during addiction do push people to prioritize drug use above everything else. As with being in love, the feeling that they have is that they just can't survive emotionally without the substance, or in the case of love, the person. These alterations occur in specific brain circuits, particularly those that connect a region known as the nucleus accumbens and the prefrontal cortex. Many addictive processes disrupt or affect these projections and can lead to cravings or inability to make wise decisions. And that, in turn, causes a return to substance and dysregulation of delayed gratification.
All right, those are our quotes from more famous people than us. But if we want to put on the final slide, Brandon, this one is so beautiful. And this thought came about years ago. I was at a presentation and there was a man named Dr. Ron Smith, who was actually an MD doctor, but he was also himself in recovery and helped write the Parity Act of 2008. And he gave a quote and he said, "This is the only disease that heals with love," which of course feels very counterintuitive to all of the brain material that we just presented. But there have been a lot of studies. In fact, there was one last week in the New York Times that I would encourage you to look up on opioids feel like love, and speaks to the fundamental human need for a connection. But there's also a study that came out of Sydney, Australia, and it is about the love hormone, oxytocin. And that's a chemical that promotes bonding. It's the chemical that new moms produce when they're feeding their newborn babies. And it is, it's a sense of belonging. And these studies show that when you meet in a peer group, such as a 12 support group or the family groups that Carli runs, or along with peers, that there's actually the hormone oxytocin that's released. And so I want to finish with a quote that was written by Dr. Judith Grisel in this book that is she wrote, called Never Enough. And she was a neuroscientist, and she had about 30 years of recovery from drugs and alcohol. And through the book, and she dissects all of the drugs and alcohol and the use, but here's what she says that that fits with our concept of love and healing with love. She said, "It seems profoundly significant that the material change began when my father inexplicably changed course and took me out for my 23rd birthday. Federal agents, friends' deaths, expulsions and evictions, physical withdrawal, and other tragedies weren't enough to propel me to change. Instead, it was human love and connection." And I will speak to each and every one of you directly by saying that you can contribute to social change and inspire hope by gathering groups like this to meet and to talk, and by allowing the opportunity to share, people to share their narratives. And in that way, we can change lives and we can save lives. And thank you so much, Mario. And thank you so much to Carli, who's just loved by our families universally in our program. So